to Farming Simulator, and today we're going to have a look at a topic that was very popular when I did it before, and that is the most profitable animal. Well, not quite this time. So we've got MaizePlus now and the animal food additions, and what I'm going to do is revisit all of the animals over a bit of time and just look at how MaizePlus and the changes in feeding and what you get out of them changes the economics of the different types of animals. And I've started with chickens because they're, one of the most popular ones. They're quite cheap to get into, and before MaizePlus they were always very profitable. So I'm going to do a couple of things. I've done it differently to how I did it before. I have not run a farm for a year, which is what I did before, to see whether we could make money. I've done a bit more of a dive into the data. So what I'm going to show you in a bit is the detail, but basically what I've looked at is how much food do chickens eat with and without MaizePlus and the animal food additions. It's the same for chickens, but I play with the animal food addition, so I'll be doing all of these videos with the animal food additions enabled. So how much do they eat with and without MaizePlus? For chickens, the outputs don't change, so how many eggs do they produce? Therefore, what does it cost to feed your chickens for a year with some different options? How much do you get back from selling the eggs? How much difference is there if you just grew the food and sold it versus growing the food, feeding it to the chickens? There. So the food options that I've looked at before I get into the data, because we're going to jump out of the game and into PowerPoint, I'm afraid. So obviously we have the base game chicken feed, if I can find it. Let's go into the big bags. So we've got the base game chicken feed, which is just wheat. That is £1,400 per 1,000 litres. And then along with MaizePlus, we get the Doika branded chicken feed. So that is £1,040 per 1,000 litres. And if you're going to feed chickens with pre-bought food like that, you're looking at using 90% of the Doika feed and 10% of the base game wheat. So I've worked out that ratio. And then the other thing that I have looked at using for feed, and you'll have seen a hint of it as we scrolled through the shop, is the farm supply pack. Awesome mod for cheaply feeding your animals. Basically, you can buy pretty much 5,000 litres of anything that's base game for £1,000. So I've also costed up feeding the chickens, buying the 4 components this way. This is what I'm doing on my Patreon series where I have chickens. I've been buying it because it's really cheap. So you'll see we do have a chicken feed palette, but that will be base game, so it's effectively just wheat. I hadn't spoiled that there was fertilizer or straw or silage. So yeah, we've got things like I'm just trying to remember in my head what the components of chicken food are. So we've got things like the soybeans, the wheat, the maize, and the sugar beet available to buy from the farm supply pack. So let's unfortunately for you, unless you really like PowerPoint, let's get out of the game and have a look at what adding MaizePlus does to some of the finances and how much the chickens eat and all that kind of thing. Okay, so first thing to do is to run through what the chickens eat with MaizePlus, how much they eat, and how many eggs they produce a year. So this is for one mature chicken, so 6 months old and on, because it's stable for chickens beyond that point. With MaizePlus and the animal food additions enabled, you're going to be looking at 35% soybeans, 10% wheat, 35% maize, 20% sugar beet. There are some other foods in those groups, but those are the ones that I picked to do this testing with. Basically, because you can buy those in the store easily with the different options. So an adult chicken, 6 months old, as I said, will eat 240 litres of food per year. That is a 4 times increase on the base game setting. And then they'll produce 84 litres of eggs per year. So the way I got some of this information is basically that chicken pen that you saw has 800 chickens in it. So I ran that for a few months, collected a bunch of data with and without MaizePlus, and it actually taught me something about how MaizePlus works. So with the way MaizePlus and the animal food additions works, where you'll see an ad in the feed column, it actually doesn't add it to the number that's there already. It just doesn't wipe everything out that's in that section when it still replaces it. So they don't eat quite as much as I thought. Might have to do a separate video on that. But yeah, so an adult chicken will eat 240 litres of food a year, which is 4 times more than base game, where they eat 60 litres of food a year, and then they'll produce 84 litres of eggs per year. MaizePlus doesn't change how many eggs they produce. I'm planning to look at doing that as well, about changing that, but not at the moment. So just doing things as delivered. So what does that mean? That means I've pressed the wrong button. There we go. You wouldn't think I'd do this thing for a job, would you? So what if you sold, so if you grew the crops and sold them, how would that compare to feeding it to the chickens? So what I've done is I've taken the peak values on Obeleron for the save that I had for each of the crops on all of the difficulties, how much they eat, so the proportion of what they eat. So kind of worked out proportionally what the food is worth per 1,000 litres, based off of the different crops. So the £2,040 is what 1,000 litres of chicken food would be worth from the different components if you sold it. Hopefully that makes sense. And then use that to work out an amount per year. I'm just going to check that number to make sure that I updated it. I did. So the I was all ready to record this video, and I was just doing some more testing, and I had to change the numbers. And so, yeah, a chicken will eat on easy mode £489 worth of food in a year. Normal 293, and hard 163. So that's the value of the crops, using the crops that I've got here. If you grew them and sold them straight rather than putting them through a chicken. How many eggs will a chicken produce in a year, or how much value? So an egg produces a chicken, but then a chicken produces 84 litres of eggs in a year. And so on easy mode, that's worth £352, normal 211, hard 117. And that means that with MaizePlus enabled and the animal food editions, if you're growing the crops, you're actually better to sell them directly if you want to make the most money. So the eggs are worth about 72% of what the crop is worth. That's not so great, I guess. And what you could do is go into the animal food editions and reduce that 20 down to, say, 5, which is what it is base game. The alternative is a lot of times when I use chickens in the game, I will be buying their food, particularly early on. So let's have a look at some options for buying food. So if you use that farm supply pack that I show you, and I'll try and remember to put a link for that below, which is £1,000 per 5,000 litres of food. And remember, a chicken is only eating 240 litres of food a year. That's only going to cost you £48 per chicken per year to feed. And that's versus at least £117 worth of eggs, depending on the difficulty you're on. The difficulty multiplier doesn't change the price of things in the store. So you know that works pretty well. If you want to go the the slightly less cheaty route, I guess, then it's not so good. So if you want to use the base game food and buy the Doika feed, then you're looking at, so it's going to be, as I said back up here, chickens eat 10% wheat, which is what the base game food is, and then 90% will be the rest of it. And that works out at costing £258 per chicken per year. So that, if you're playing on anything other than easy mode, again, you're losing money. So I think you probably, if you're going to buy the food, you don't want to be buying it in big bags and pallets from the base game. You can save a bit if you use the Doika buy point. That reduces the cost of stuff by 20%. So 1 second, I'll just try and do some very quick maths. So I had meant to work that out before I started. It reduces that 258 to 213. So still not enough to be breaking even with just selling the eggs on normal or hard mode. So something like the farm supply pack is a really good option. There are probably some other buy points that let you buy food at a reduced cost. So what does that mean? We've done a bit of PowerPoint. I've done some Excel in the background, and we have a graph, because who doesn't love a graph? So straight off, you'll see that, the orange line at the bottom where you're losing money. So this is over years, so it covers 5 years. So the orange line is MaizePlus buying food using the base game things and the Doika parts of food. And yeah, you're basically losing money the whole way through. This is per chicken. Then going to slightly better cases, we've got the yellow and the grey line are base game cases, where you're either using base game food, which is the slightly lower one, or the farm supply pack, which is the grey line, which is the higher one. And kind of the saving point for me, I think, is that if you're using the farm supply pack with MaizePlus, then you're doing better than base game, but not as good as straight base game and buying from the farm supply pack. So if you want to make money from chickens and make more money from chickens with MaizePlus, the animal food additions, then you're really looking at using something like the farm supply pack, or something else that lets you buy the components of feed for a lot less than either it costs to use the base game elements, or that it costs to grow the crops. I mean, you could still grow the crops and feed them to chickens. You're just going to make a bit less money, but you're doing something fun. So, some people don't mind that. For me, it's not something that I tend to do. But my the way that I approach this with my series that the patrons get to see is that I treat the products from the farm supply pack as lower quality feed grade grain or whatever you're buying. So it's kind of like the waste that doesn't go into the human chain. So the cost of the value of the crops that you grow, you assume that you're growing mostly high quality crops. You look after them, you fertilize them, you keep the weeds out and stuff. So you're growing good quality, human grades may be wrong, but you're producing good quality crops that get a premium price. Whereas to feed our chickens, we don't need that premium quality product. So we're using something like the farm supply pack to buy feed grade quality things. That's how I do it in my head. It's kind of up to you. So those are the numbers. Basically, MaizePlus does make chickens less profitable, but you can still make money from them. So the plan going forwards with these videos is actually, I'll jump out of PowerPoint now. We'll get back in the game, because there's a couple of points that I want to cover. That's better. Bit of farm sim background. So that's chickens. And when I did this series before, I eventually got to the point where I went through and compared the profitability of the different animals. And I did that a very different way to how I've just done this. I did it by running a farm with each of the animal types for a year. I started doing that with chickens, and it was quite time consuming. Just to feed chickens, you need to grow 4 different crops. And that really impacts the speed that you can get through things. When I did this before without MaizePlus for chickens, I grew, I think, a field of barley each year, and it would feed the chickens. And at the end of the year, I may or may not have had to buy, I think at the start I had to buy some chicken food. But I would grow 1 field of barley and it would feed the chickens. It was much simpler and therefore much quicker to collect the data. I kind of prefer this approach because I'm giving you actual numbers of the chickens eat this much and they produce this much. Because the feeding is much more complicated with MaizePlus, I think that's the way I'm going to do it. I might try and still create something which gives you an idea of how the different animals compare. The way I did that before was basically based on the value of the animal. So chickens obviously are really cheap. But you know, so they're delivered, an adult chicken is £55 versus over there we have a shed with Holsteins in, which are, you know, significantly more per animal. So I turned it into a per £1,000, and I'm curious if that's useful for people. You know, do you care? You know, if I invest, and it doesn't include things like buying the enclosures because they're so variable. But you know, let's say if I choose to invest 10 grand in chickens, am I going to make more than if I invest 10 grand in dairy cows? You know, does that kind of thing interest you, or do you not care? As long as you know that you're going to make money off of what you're doing. Yeah. So that was kind of the random bit that I wanted to talk about. Little spoiler alert, dairy's probably next. So that's set up for me to collect the data. The MaizePlus side is easy because all the data is in MaizePlus. The non-MaizePlus side, I have to do some testing to generate the numbers. Because when I did it before, I didn't really worry too much about that exact detail. I was doing it as I am running a chicken farm, a dairy farm. Do I make money? Not exactly how much am I putting in. Whereas this time I've set it up so that I can track what I'm putting in and then work out the value of that using some different options. So dairy cows are probably coming next. I'm not sure when. But chickens, the sort of the TLDW, but if you've got this far, you've already watched it, is you can still make money with chickens with MaizePlus. If you're growing the crops yourself and feeding them, you're going to make a bit less than if you sell them at best price, but you get the pleasure of looking after chickens. Or you could be putting the extra production or that kind of thing. So you know, that's where the value is probably. Or if you buy the food with something like the farm supply pack, you are actually still making, you know, more than you would have made in base game without something like the farm supply pack, and still a good amount compared to base game with the farm supply pack, because that food is so cheap. So yeah, that's it for this video pretty much. This series was really popular last time I did it, so I'm hoping that you guys enjoy it this time. If you have enjoyed it and you've got this far, why don't you click the like button? Because that will let me know that you liked it. Comments, questions, or suggestions below. Particularly curious as to how people want to see me work out the numbers for the other animals. Cows, I'm battling with how I'm going to do that. Because obviously you can do a lot with grass with cows, and that's kind of, you know, it's a really inexpensive way of feeding your animals. One grass field will feed quite a lot. But I think that's going to be kind of tricky. So curious on people's feedback on that. And if you've watched this far and you aren't, and at least half of you aren't still, click subscribe. Because if the half of you that watch this stuff that aren't subscribe, I'll be closer to 5,000 subscribers and me giving something away. And, you know, that would be cool. And I think that's it. So I will see you next time.